Good morning, Tim. Once again, hopefully we are all good. I would request you humble ourselves with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you that we are here. We thank you for our lives, for the HRP family, for individual families, for the provision of knowledge, understanding, and the skills. We come before you this morning, seeking your guidance to come and lead us in this session of training and help us understand and be able to execute whatever we learn. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Father. We pray, believing and trusting. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, team. Yesterday, I remember we had covered quite a big number as far as entitlements, where I mentioned that entitlements are basically tied to the license. And from the brief, we all know that the license is basically either essential, team member, or premium. So if I assign you a team member, there are things that you may not do regardless of whether I've given a super user permission set, full data permission set, and whatsoever as any other privilege. If you are an essential user, there are things you may not do regardless of whether you have full user or no. And then as far as entitlements are concerned, we saw that it basically for online, for business center online, and on the other hand, it's basically introduced to ease the monetization of our apps on the App Store or on the App Source, where the expectation is as we define our individual apps to be deployed on the App Store, we define exactly the scope of which functionalities should be accessed by a user or a client or a customer that may happen to purchase such an app. Yesterday, I had a question from Alan regarding how are these apps, App Store, get to know which ID range these are going to be in. The last time I got to do, I was trying it with May. We downloaded an app called Data Editor. And at the time of having it installed on their environment, it requested for us to configure or to assign it ID ranges that are not yet used within our environment. And we did, and it was able to be deployed within my environment. We just had it out of the store. However, when it comes to online business central, you notice that these days IDs are no longer an issue, and I'm sure they have added what we call a prefix on whichever solution somebody does, in that the prefix and IDs are ideally the primary identifier of your application. What does it mean? We can have as many applications we deploy as HRP, as long as we put our prefix, as long as we follow how we should tie it into the licensing bit using entitlement and permission sets, in that the app, once the app is downloaded by whoever would wish to purchase it, it already has what it entails to be accessed and to be used. You would remember, if you are to design your own application currently, it will simply mean you are going to go to deploy it, go to each user, and actually define the different permissions for each person. However, here, since we are defining our own permissions within the application, we define our own permissions that once the app is deployed, the permission sets will already be listed in the available permissions or assignable permissions, and then the person administering the infrastructure, the application, can go on and assign the permissions as per what you have defined in your application. So that calls for an exhaustive dig down of the permission set and how they are. That's the topic today. Permission sets. The permission set object in Business Central describes permissions on objects. Permissions are building blocks that are used to compose assignable permission sets and entitlements. I had mentioned yesterday that entitlements are ideally a group of permission sets. And I'd mentioned you can only have permission sets referencing to objects within the same application or the same extension. If you happen to do permission set referencing objects of another extension, even if you have depended on it in your permission description and entitlement, it will always show you a warning. So basically, the principle is, as I'm defining permission set and entitlement, they should all be confined within my app, within my extension. So we looked at there are two types. I can define assignable permission sets or I can define non-assignable. What do I mean? When I say assignable, you noticed yesterday that there are permissions where we just say include. I'm defining a certain permission set, but I want them to be included. An example, we know very well that we have a basic permission set, but you may want to say, let me define my basic permission set and have it included in all the permissions I'm going to define. In that I don't have to assign one person two permission sets whenever I'm defining permissions on any video, but rather you decide to say you define your permission, your basic permission set, put whatever you think is a bare minimum there, and then define the other subsequent permission sets where you just include it to be part of the permissions. Somebody will always get explicitly whenever assigned the new permission sets. So that brings the concept of assignable and non-assignable, as we're going to see. Permission sets are permission that an admin can assign to users in Business Central by using the permission set page. An entitlement is a collection of permission sets that comprise a set of meaningful permissions for a user. Some permission sets can be non-assignable, meaning they aren't discoverable and assignable in the UI in Business Central. Instead, they can be used as building blocks to compose functional assignable permission sets. So I'm going to go to the next slide. Hopefully it's visible. Please let me know when you are able to see. If you can't, I can zoom in.
And see.
To define a permission set, we use a snippet or a shortcut T permission set, which create a basic layout for any permission set object when you're creating it in R. In this presentation, we created two forms of permission sets. As example, we have a sales permission set, which we've defined, and you know very well when it comes to permission set, we are under four operations. That is the read, insert, modify, and delete. I won't go much into those details. I'm just going to go straight to the example. I'd already talked about this yesterday. Permission set, you give it an ID and a name. Then among the key properties here, we have assignable set to true, meaning that in the user interface, I can see this permission set in my user interface of the assignable permission sets. If I set it to false, it won't be visible actually. Then just a caption as usual, and then the permissions which are going directly to which data table, what table data you are defining in this permission set. Under permission is basically defining which tables, which areas are accessible. This could be table data, could be pages, could be code units, could be reports. But you know very well when it's a page, the only thing we're looking for is execution. When it is a code unit, it's execution. When it is a report, it's execution. So the key component to know the name, the ID, the property being assignable or not, being set to true or false, as well as the permission, the individual table you want to access, or pages, or reports, or code units. Then another concept of permission set. The following example of permission set will illustrate assign the permission to run code units with include permission set property. You need to specify that the sales permission set is also included in my permission set. Like I mentioned, I could define a certain permission set for probably a given set of users, meaning that it's sufficient for them. Then later, I might need to define a more elevated permission set where the previous permission set is just a subset. That's when the component of included permission set can come in. I don't have to redefine all the permissions in my new permission set. I can just reference an already defined permission set using the included permission set property, and it inherits automatically the permissions of the other permission set. Then on top of this, you can add more of your permissions, or more table, more code units, more pages. Okay, and this is how it is presented. The structure remains the same, just that there's a specific property called included permission set that we need to pay attention to. Okay, then we have another element of extending permission set. As a brief, not to just follow the text. When you say follow, when you say extend permission set, you know very well as it is for pages, tables, and reports, you can extend a certain object. Table, page, report. What we need to extend normally is basically to add a new functionality or to alter how a certain functionality happens. Here in permission sets, the principle is when we're extending a permission set, the only thing you can do is to do additional functionality to give more permissions, but not to revoke, not to reduce on the permissions that are already defined. So the permission set extension object in Business Central adds permissions to an existing permission set that is defined in R. Permission set extension objects can't remove permissions from an existing permission set. It can only add permissions. For example, if you add an extension to Business Central, you can use permission set extension object to grant permission to the objects in your extension. Basically, the administrator of Business Central does not have to assign additional permission set to user because that assignment automatically happens when the extension is installed and the permissions go away if the extension is uninstalled. Let me hope that you understand this context, that if I had assigned Alan a permission set that I developed customally in AL, and now I need to extend that permission set probably in another extension, I will just continue and do my extension, publish, then Alan will automatically get the new additional permissions I've extended. Please take note, here the concept is you can extend the permission sets that have been defined in AL. Hopefully we are good in that category. Permission set. Typing the shortcut T permission set extension will create a basic layout for permission set extension object when you're using an R language extension, Visual Studio. The following permission set example extend a source permission set by adding a direct insert and direct and delete permission to the current table data. Here, we remember previously we defined our permission set called source person. Here, we're just demonstrating how we can extend it provided we are in another extension that depends on this. So here it is just by a snippet of tip permission set extension. It will give you this structure the same way we do for pages and reports, but here the object we're referencing is a permission set object. Give it that it's assignable, and we define our permissions in it. Notice in the previous, if I'm to take you back, remember in our salesperson, for the current table, it was just a read and modify. Then we need to add more permissions to this particular one. If I go now in my extension, you'll notice it has extended the permission set, and particularly for the same table currency, we are adding it an insert and a delete. That is the ID. Okay. There's also a command for creating and updating permissions in an extension. This is a command I was first introduced to, I think, by Alan some time back, but I didn't understand the context where it all comes from. But for now, I really got to know. You notice for whoever has published an extension to Linux Central Online, the system automatically requests for you to define a permission set for all the objects in that extension. And you may not really go in depth to create a permission set of each and every object. If you happen to do it manually, you are likely to miss out on some. So as a command, it has been incorporated. We'll do the normal command, Ctrl Shift P, algo, for creating a new project. Here we'll do Ctrl Shift P, generate permission set for extension object. It will generate for you a permission set file in considering all the objects in your extension, and it inserts the read, the insert, the modify, and the delete, as I'm going to show you. It will do that automatically for you. Why is this important? The extension might be so big and you may not ideally remember all the objects you have used and that you are going to go and type it manually. Yes, we can define a permission set well and good, but you may not really be able to remember each and every object you've used in your extension. And using this command, it can help you auto-generate for you that particular permission set file by considering all the objects you have in the system or in your extension without missing out any. This same command can be used to update an existing one or to create a new one. Now we have this interesting bit of override entitlement with inherent permissions. I'm going to talk briefly about this before we dive in the practical side. When we say override override entitlement with inherent permissions, what does it mean? Take an example. I could be assigned a permission set of a team member. It is limited in its functionality. And you know very well that you might want that team member to execute a certain process or execute and run a certain function or procedure that ideally should have been done by an essential user. So now in in R, they are provisioned to access or to give permissions at a functional level or at a procedure level. What do I mean? To some people who have earlier written reports in the lower version where I can go and assign my report, I give it some explicit permissions. Let's say I'm trying to modify customer ledger entries. You know very well, it's only modified through a posting routine here and there. Now you want to write a processing report that should modify that, and as you run it, it normally asks that you don't have permission to do this process. You might go in and give it on the object level, on the processing report level. You go and give it access to customer entry table to someone who has done that before. You would go again and run the object and would actually update as you would wish. Now, here it has been extended to even a function that I can define my function. I instruct it to inherit permissions of execution as it would be in a full user mode. In that I could, if I'm a team member, I know as a team member, I cannot create a new sales order or I cannot create a new purchase order, but I can do that if I do a procedure and I tell it or instruct it to inherit the permissions of a team member, rather of an essential member, or of anyone with super permissions. But at a function level, that person can only do so when they are running that particular function that have given such rights or inherent permissions. If you access another function that have not extended inherent permissions, it will behave normally. So with the inherent permission, developer can now grant permission to a method or event while code executes. As soon as the code execution is completed, the permissions are revoked. Inherent permissions simply override overall management and maintenance work of permission sets. With it, a specific AL method or event can get the elevated permission necessary to finish the task at hand without getting permission errors. This feature helps tighten overall security by limiting long-term user permissions and giving members to the code process instead. Let me hope people have understood this concept. I'm going to demonstrate it the way I picked it. I remember we had an issue with Emmanuel. If you remember, we had an issue with emails when we were implementing. Was it UTP that team members were not able to send email notifications because of how we had implemented we had done custom workflows other than the standard, and we had introduced our own tables, but when it came to sending emails, any team member would not actually be able to do that. So still here, with this knowledge, it will still be possible in that I define my functions for sending email notification, and I give them the rights so that I override what had earlier been said that you are just merely a team member. I could give you more elevated permissions to complete your task. Only that particular task I've allocated to you. So that is the override entitlements. I will demonstrate that when it comes to practicality. So going back to our practical session, and we see how it all unveils. I have my extension here, and the training extension. I hope the one that is opening. Let's confirm that this is the one I've on. Back again. Just a minute. Still updating, just a minute. Okay, no, it's not the one. Let me change to go to I've done one for training customization. So I'm going to first comment out this file because I earlier created it using the other command. One of the things I want to show you is if I say it's some element indicated here. This command here will generate permission set for extension. I'm going to, this is the one I generated earlier, but I'm going to comment it out and we'll try to generate it together. It's a matter of Control Shift P. Then there's a command down here, generate permissions as all object containing current extension objects. When I click onto it, it gives me two options. Do I need to create a new one or do I have to update an existing one? You get? I'm going to select new one, but if I was to update an existing one, I would just select any of these. I'm going to say new. Which name am I going to give it? I'm going to leave it as generated permissions. I'm going to say, okay. What is these things? It's not down here. Just a minute. The thing is not. How do I hide this portion? Okay. Okay. You see, it has created my permission set here. It's the one that I've just created. All together. And you notice this one is ideally the one that is coming about this. Generate permission set for extension objects is what has done this for you. What would this mean? It will mean you don't have to worry about getting a permission set in case you want it to be lumped up. You have developed, let's say, if this extension, and if this extension need to create its own specific permission. You can run such a command, you generate that permission set, it gets here. It will do everything for you. Look for table data, reports, code unit pages, it all be summed up together. Suppose you make a modification, an example. I can come here, add a new table. Let me go and add a new table, just a sample table. Here, it's an extension. Let me go and add a new table. Such a case, just to demonstrate how we could do. I'm going to come here. Let me just save this as. I'm going to save this as. I save into version 2, and this is going to be 19. I come here. I'm just adding a new table for the purpose of us to understand this. Here it is. This is 19. This is VRN2, and blah blah blah. So I have just added a new table. So in my permission set that has been previously generated, you notice that here it had only ended on a certain table. If I come into this and I look for that table, it won't be here. Which table is that? This table here. If I come and look for this table here, in this permission set, for example, it's not there. But now, after doing my, because extension development will be continuous, and you have to keep updating your extension as and when need arise. I've added new table, I've added this and that. So for me to update this extension, I'm going to come, I say generate, it will ask me, do I need to create or do I need to update? I'm going to say, I'm going to update generated permission set. So here it is, it has already done the update. It's just as swift as that. If I come here and I say, search for that particular one, where is it? This case, where is that particular one? You see, as it updated on my side. Let me first try to do this. I'm going to say save like this. If do this, you pick whatever I want to update like that. Hopefully it will do that for us. WHT, entry. So you see this version 2 here, the one that I've just added. You get this? So this was not there before. So that will demonstrate to us this command of how the permission set for extension objects. And to some of you who have already interacted with Business Center Online, I'm sure you have used this before. So going back to define our permission set is something I tried to show you yesterday. And the entitlement we demonstrated it already. Let me go to my permissions here. If it comes to defining permission, if I'm not using a command, that's when I say T permission set. Here it is. I could give it an ID of my own. I give it a name. Then I would say this is Sage version 1. Then here in assignable, the options are either true or false. I said when it comes assignable, it becomes visible on the interface. When you say false, it won't be visible on the interface. This command called included permission set. I'm going to first comment this one out. I'm going to define my objects. For example, I'm going to say, let me say table data. I'm going to give it a name. This is going to be payroll. And in my payroll, I'm going to say this is a remedy or a read. For example, I would have more tables still. Table data. I could have another table, let's say payroll setup. Here I'm defining it one by one and manually. Like this. I could say this should be a read. I define another one. Payroll here. parent. Let me just end on this. And I say it's going to be a read and modify like this. Now, that is the concept of defining a permission set. I want this. I would put this one as unassignable set to false, meaning that it won't exist on the interface. But I could have created it as a template for me to be able to inherit this in my upcoming permissions. I'm going to find another one, 11, and I'm going to say this is going to be accountant. I would say is assignable. Here in now the included permission set, I can refer to the one I've just set above. One. I can also refer to salesperson. I can also refer to whatever I put up there, another permission set I already put at the top there. The permission set that I put here, let me see. There's also my permission set. Yeah, these ones I'd already defined them earlier. So it would simply mean that this permission set I'm creating accountant, in the first place, it's inheriting these first permissions I've done in Sage version 1, salesperson, sales permission set. Then on top of those, I have my specific one that I want. That okay, here I need to add let's say human resource setup, table data human resource setup. I would say, and I need this to be a read mode, for example, like that. On top of this, I might say I need to, with other bit of, I may need to export it to execute a report. Let's say zero be report, send the payslip. This is always an X that won't execute. For pages and for tables and for code unit is an execution, which is represented by X. So this one alone would mean when I publish this, this is going to be assignable. This permission set accountant will be assignable and to display in my permission set list on the interface. But this one of Sage version 1 will not be available on the interface. But because I've included it in my permission set, all the permissions within Sage will be already inherited in my accountant permission set. So we are seeing the concept of assignable, include, and then the assignable bit. Now I will define these permissions. Going back a little to entitlement, you notice that here in entitlement, like I mentioned yesterday, this is a collection of different permission sets. I can say there is Sage version 1, there is salesperson, there is what else do we have? What is about defined in that case? There's my permission like this. So you notice that why it is giving a warning is because in, let's say, this one, let me also put accountant. Also an accountant here, accountant permission set. You notice all these ones are different permission sets that I will define individually. Here in the entitlement, I'm grouping them together. You may find that if it's an app, for example, payroll, you have different permission sets you have defined because of the different access levels in your development. But at the licensing level, which objects should the license look at and consider? So that one you define in this case. Okay, that is the concept of permission set. We can now go ahead and do an extension. How would we extend a certain permission set? Just a quick one. I won't go into depth. I'm going to go to this. To define that, it's a matter of T permission set extension object. It will give me an ID, how I should call it. Which permission set am I extending? I'm going to extend accountant, the one I just created. And in here, I'm giving it a name, accountant, permissions, accountant set extension. Do I need to include other permission set? Yes or no? I may not because I may not need this. but I may need to define more additional permission sets, more additional objects. I may say table data. I need this one to have more objects. For example, I may need this to have WHT. This person to have a read, just like this, just as an extension. This is demonstrating how we extend a permission set. The structure, you define the name and you point it to a certain permission set you are trying to extend. Then the last bit I want to demonstrate is basically the element of overriding entitlements. Like I mentioned, that entitlements are really tied to the license. And as an example, you could have what you call a certain level of access, or I've defined a user and assigned permissions. Or for example, you are a super data where you're not meant to actually to execute, to process, you're only interested in viewing reports and reporting about them, but you're not meant to capture any journal entry, you're not meant to capture any employee-related entry. So I'm going to just demonstrate something here, how that could be overwritten at the point of defining a function. Which functions can I use? Just pick any of these. The functions I could pick just randomly here. Just a minute. Just need to get something more practical, but you often do. I just have some function I could use. Let me check. Doesn't have any function. Just a minute. Yeah. Here. I could have some activities I could reference to. Just a minute. I need to use a specific one that we always. Let me see. Do you have a sent? This is example. Okay, I'm going to just do something funny with this. I'm going to define a function at the bottom here, just to demonstrate this. Just define. So here I might define a function. This function, I'm going to name it send approval request. And I am going to define its structure here, like this. So here you notice that I've just primarily defined the function, and this function, it means I'm going to call it in one of my actions, and somebody would be able to use it. But now suppose you don't have permissions on any of these tables. You don't have permission on purchase and payables, on general ledger, workflow. You don't have any on this. It will definitely throw you an error in real sense, in actual practice. But now you can do inherit by just putting this action inherent permissions. Hope you can see. Just on top of this, where we define it, we're going to define it together here. It indicates of which permission set object you're going to assign. Are you giving this person a table, ID, access to a specific table, access to a specific page? So in the process, I'm going to give this person a table. Let me say here, object type. Which object type can I use in this case? Object type can I use Which one can I use? I'm going to give this person access to a certain table, and I'm going to give this person which table? I'm going to give it, let's say, database. Sometimes this is defined differently. I'm going to give it purchase and payables. Just give it any. Just that you need to understand this how it would work. I see you're running of time. Then the permissions I'm giving it to, let me give it RIMD. Then here, I'm going to say inherent scope. I'm going to say both permissions, and let me say both. It's not being what I need. Just this object permission. I already find the ID of permission set object type. Permission set object type. I want to say this. Let me say table data. Okay, I see what I've defined here. Hopefully you can all follow through. So in this case, members, take note. You take note of this particular, and I've just defined it just out of to demonstrate the concept of overriding permissions. Yes, you could have been defined and assigned a different permission as far as probably the license is concerned. And in actual sense, if you're now sending an approval request for a purchase order, since you don't have access to the existing tables, the system will throw that you don't have permission to do this. But by the fact that I add this line on that function that I'm going to reference, it will execute. Because I've given you, I've overwritten what permission have been assigned in as far as your license is concerned and in as far as your permission set is concerned on the user interface. But you can now just execute this for a time being. Once you are done with execution, the permissions are revoked back, go back to the default setting. This simply means I'm giving explicit permissions on table data, that is X purchase order, and I'm giving you the RIMD read, insert, modify, delete, and then I'm defining the scope. When I say the scope, that are we looking at it at a permission set level, or are looking at it at an entitlement level? The options here are as follows: both entitlements, permissions. Permissions are as far as what you have defined in the user interface. Permission set assigned to a user. Entitlements as far as your license is concerned, which object you are entitled to use. Both entitlements and permissions. So I've just set it to both, just to be certain that nothing is left out. So when somebody happened to click any action where I've referenced send approval request, even if you don't have the permissions on the interface assigned to you, but because I've given you this particular line on this table, if this table is involved in any of the actions here, definitely you will execute. That one is basically how we do this particular element of override entitlements with inherent permissions. Okay. There comes to an end of our presentation. I just need to wind up with this particular. I'd corrected some elements to check on our knowledge. Unfortunately, let me first see if it can open for me. I'll say, let me open this link, copy the link, let me put it in my X. See what it does for us as part of how and what we check. I had collected these as part of our knowledge check because I'm not only reading also have to read to prepare ourselves for the exam. And here we are. What are entitlements in Business Central? Please, anyone ready for this? We have these options. Objects in Business Central that the customer is entitled to use according to the license that they purchased or the role assigned. Objects that are an administrator gave to the user customer. Objects that the customer user gave to the partner. Object that the partner gave to the customer. Who is going for this? Do I say randomly? Do you have any response? Number one. Okay. What are permission set objects in this case? What are permission set objects? It's number one says property that customers are entitled to use. And number two, entitlement for customers according to an acquired license. Then three, building blocks that are used to compose assignable permission sets and entitlements. Two, data that is used to deny access to other customers and partners. Which one are you going for? John, Irene, speaker.
I go with three.
I go with
Three. SPK, you had a different one?
no, it's a mistake. It's okay.
What is a permission set extension object? Option one, an object that is used to define customer references. Option two, building blocks that are used to compose assignable permission sets and entitlements. Then three, an object that is used to define which permission that the customer is entitled to use in Business Central. Option D, an object that adds permission to an existing permission set that is defined in R. Which one are you going for?
First one.
Come again? Irene, are you there?
I go with D.
With D. Okay. Here you go. You can do check our answers and see what comes ahead. Yeah, I think you've gotten it right. Wow. Thank you. Unless when you have questions, I beg to end here. I tried to keep the time, but it wasn't really, it was unavoidable.
Thank you very much, John. I don't know that there are any questions. Yeah, thank you for that presentation. For permission sets, I believe it's new to most of us. So as usual, I encourage you to go to the documentation and also read. Right now, you have a clue on what entitlements are, permission sets, how to do permission extensions, among other things. So go back and read. And I think this has been very, very informative. So next week, we have a watch. Next week, we have a watch. I know Friday is a public holiday. If I look your watch with creating queries in Business Central. So watch, prepare, and ensure that by next week we can also go through that and have it concluded. Thanks, everyone. I wish you a great day ahead.
Thank you. Bye-bye.